Welcome everybody. Here we're doing a talk on Pluto, and we're looking at how we got from Capricorn into Aquarius, or how we'll be moving from Capricorn into Aquarius. So we have a few different experiences that we want to share with you. And then towards the second half, we're going to start to look at how Pluto and Aquarius might look collectively for the rest of us and for the world at large. So I'm going to start with Travis, if you want to give us an idea of how you've experienced Pluto. And that has been, of course, since the beginning of 2008 in terms of when Pluto went into Capricorn. So take it away.
So I have Pluto on my ascendant natally. So Pluto is kind of a daily thing for me. I feel very Scorpionic, even though I don't have any placements in Scorpio. So I feel like I'm getting to know Pluto energy more and more every year. And it's good and bad, I guess I could say. I had Pluto going through my fourth house, which as an angular house was pretty intense. In 2010, my third son was born, so that was really good. And but then in 2012, Pluto was in squaring my ascendant and my natal Pluto. Which was intense. And I also had Uranus opposing my ascendant. So that's when I went through my mental health crisis. And I had to go to counseling because I started to have panic attacks and things like that. So in counseling is where I started talking about my childhood for the first time, and fourth house is childhood and all of that. So talking about that stuff was intense, and it was helpful, but it was also kind of triggering. And also that year, my wife and I started a home business, a baking business, and we did farmers markets around the area. But it was very stressful. We had to be up at 3 a.m. to start baking, and we had we were living in a small space, and it wasn't really the best for our relationship. And but we stuck with it for a while. And I'm trying to check my notes here. So this was about 2014, and during that time I quit counseling, and that's when I started drawing comics about my childhood, and it helped me process them better. And I started to feel better about my memories and what I went through as a child. I did that for a couple of years, and those pages is what became my book that was published in 2019. And at that time, Pluto was opposite my midheaven when that was going on. And later that year in 2019, we closed the business because of the stress, and it wasn't really covering our bills. We were just getting more and more into debt and more stressed out. And I ended up getting a job out in the community as a case manager working with adults with disabilities. Then 2020 COVID hit, and we were sent home to work from home. So I was back working from home, fourth house. And a few months after that, my wife had an emergency surgery, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer, which was a shock because she had been struggling with health issues for a while, but we didn't think it was, she didn't think it was anything serious. So moving on, she started going through her chemotherapy and things like that. And then in 2021, we sold our home where we had been for about 20 years and moved to another town that we had always wanted to live in. It's right on the ocean, and it's really beautiful here. But then sadly in 2022, my wife passed away in July. And that was when Pluto was within 6 degrees of my natal moon. So that's what that happened there.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And I've been having some crazy dreams just the past couple of days with her. And I hadn't been. There was a couple nights where we were in the same room and it was separated by a sheet. And I knew she was on the other side, but I couldn't see her. And then last night, I dreamed that I was going to go see her. And I always like to do silly things to make her laugh. So I put this tattoo of a giant heart on my cheek, like one of those fake tattoos that you rub on. And so I met her and she didn't laugh, but she smiled. And it was kind of sweet. And I'm still processing this whole thing. Like I'm going to counseling and again, and which is helping, but I probably need to start drawing. I need to start drawing again because it seems to help me more. And then just recently, my two oldest sons moved out, and so I've gone from a family of 5 to a family of 2. So a lot of changes with Pluto going through my 4th house. And
it's huge. It's huge. That's
yeah,
yeah.
It was intense. I feel like during this time I was just learning astrology and I couldn't really use it to my advantage, but looking back, I'm able to understand more what happened and make more sense of things and process it.
But from the point of view of Pluto being a deep transformation in our psychology, which is also your 4th house, what do you feel you've learned in all of that transformation?
To be honest, I feel like I feel stronger emotionally a little bit, but I also feel like I'm becoming more psychic. And I don't know if it's because Pluto is approaching my moon or what, but a lot of weird dreams and premonitions lately, the past year. So I think maybe that's one of the positive things. I'm also coming up to my Chiron return, and Pluto's going to be conjunct my moon exact. And I'm hoping to heal more. I have Chiron in the 7th house. So we'll see.
Fantastic. Thank you. I always appreciate the depth that you're willing to go. You're super, super vulnerable with us. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm hoping it might help some people or not.
How do you see the next few years shaping up as Pluto then goes into Aquarius? What do you see that might change energetically? Because we still have a Saturn ruled Pluto, but it's now Aquarius, which will be a little different.
Right, and when Saturn's in Pisces, I think that Pluto's going to be stronger than it was in Capricorn because Saturn's not there to reel it in. If I could say one more dream I had of, I think it's Pluto in Aquarius, is I was on the phone with customer service trying to get something resolved. And I wasn't talking to the person on the other end. I was using a Google app to talk for me. And it was a female voice, and it was soft and quiet and polite and trying to explain to the person on the other end the issue. And I wasn't getting anywhere with customer service. And the voice on the app changed to a deep male voice that began to become very aggressive and demanding. And it was just so weird. And I don't know if that resolved the problem with customer service because I woke up, but it was just seemed like, I don't know, Pluto and Aquarius dream with AI and all of that. But I think Pluto's going to dig up a lot of stuff for us to deal with facing, technology and groups and how we think. And I don't know if it's going to, with Saturn and Pisces and Uranus and Taurus, if it's going to be events showing up in the 3D that affects our consciousness, or our consciousness affecting the 3D, or a mix of the two.
And you're an artist, so what do you think about this AI art that's starting already now, but it's certainly going to be used much more?
Yeah, I don't know, because I'm so traditional as an artist. I don't use the computer for hardly anything except to scan my pages and email them. My son uses a digital tablet, and it can do all sorts of things that anything you can imagine this tablet will do. And he draws right on it as if it was a piece of paper.
Does it improve his drawing, or is it showing exactly what he's drawing?
He has more choices as far as media and the tools. But also, if he makes a mistake, he can instantly get rid of it. He can move stuff around, change the background, do anything. And so I'm fine with that. I'm just not, I don't know how keen I am on AI creating art, because I think art is the one thing that the human mind can beat AI at. And so I'm hoping that's what happens.
Yeah, super. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so Ronit, would you like to carry on for your experience of Pluto and Capricorn?
Yes, so I have Mars and Venus in Capricorn in the 3rd house, and Pluto has been traveling there since 2008, where I had a clothing business, which I bought not knowing much about the industry. And I ran this business for 10 years, quite successfully. And then I changed, and I moved into the restaurant industry, which I ran with my husband then. And then Pluto conjuncted my Mars right after I turned 50. And the first word that came to my mind continuously during that time was, I have to surrender. I need to surrender. And now, after I've learned astrology, and I know that the symbol of Pluto is the surrendering little man, I could just put the puzzle together and understand what happened to me in the process of surrendering. Because I remember clearly sitting in a party and asking the people around me, what is next? I've just turned 50. It's downhill. What am I going to look forward to in my life? I've been there, done that. I'm very blessed. I've done so many things. What can I expect? And it actually made me like starting to think about me. And then I started making the decision slowly after that I need to move on my own. And I've actually started the process of separating from my partner of 28 years. And then in 2017, we separated. And yeah, so that journey with the surrendering part was, how do I start my life all over again? And after I got divorced, I had to move around, move homes and find my feet. And I was living in a foreign country because it's the country where my partner was living. And then after Pluto left Mars, it moved on to my Venus, and it conjuncted my Venus. And during that time, I needed to rediscover myself as a feminine being, as a woman. Who am I as a woman, and what am I worthy of? And I met someone right on the first time when it conjuncted my Venus, who was very powerful, who swept me off my feet, who introduced me to life of the riches, from jet setting around the world to living the high life. And just like Pluto does, it just burst into like something, and then it just dropped you. It dropped me a year later, leaving me homeless and stranded in a way, not knowing what to do with my life or where to go. But by then Pluto also does things with obsession. And I became very obsessive with astrology. And I started studying tarot and astrology in 2018. And I've been studying every day when I have free time. And I think that really put everything in perspective and helped me in the journey to understand the power Pluto has, the feeling of transformation, the feeling of letting go, as well as knowing and trusting that things are going to be right. And coming across people that are controlling, coming across people that can be deceitful, and deciding to just pack up and start my life all over again by myself, because my children have left the nest, and coming back to my hometown and starting from scratch. And then on top of it, Venus again, every time it hit on the direct hit, I would have like erupting news or betrayal or secrets coming to life with very close female friends. Not one, not two, 3 times, different relationships. And but because I knew the astrological element that he's holding, and I could really be encouraged by it, is not to retaliate, not to confront, is stay back, listen, and just move forward. And for me, I think that's where astrology has really guided me in these relationships with different people in my life. And at the same time, saying that Pluto conjuncted my Venus, I have been having the most amazing female unity and friendships that are deep and supportive. And I've been gifted in so many ways, in financial ways, in emotional ways. So Pluto is dancing with us, but this dance, if you manage to land on your feet, you are so much more powerful. I had this story came to my mind when I was thinking about the subject, and it was like dancing with the stars. And on the dance floor, there's different instructors, and I've envisaged Pluto as the short, stocky, strong male who took me to this dance floor, me much taller than him, with a skimpy dress, holding me, lifting me up, swirl me around the dance floor, maneuvering me, shuffling me, and I need to surrender and enjoy it, or make the best of it, because it's not always enjoyable. And once I surrender to the moves and the dance ended, I am on my feet. And if I can catch my breath, when I catch my breath, I can move on to the next instructor, which will be Saturn in my case, with my adrenaline pumping and with strength and knowledge that this shall pass too. And yeah, I think if I look at my notes, that was my dance with Pluto. And I find that I've changed the way I look, because I was dark hair, brunette with glasses. I've changed the way I communicate. I tend to be a lot faster, and I think Pluto gave me more controlled speech because it was in my 3rd house. I am highly intuitive. I've always been, but I'm much more sharper now with Pluto being in my 3rd house. And the fact that it was squaring my moon, I moved around a lot. I've traveled in the 1 year 7 times to 7 different countries during COVID. So sometimes the impossible becomes possible. And I'm a great believer of manifesting your own reality. So I think with Pluto, you really, really have to pull that power within in order to manifest a brighter reality, because it can hit us all hard. But I'm a Sagittarius, positive, optimistic person.
Where's your natal Pluto?
My natal is my 11th house in Virgo, and it's conjuncting my Uranus natally.
Good. You remember, and the 3rd house, some people consider the house of dancing. So
Oh, really?
arts and dancing, yeah, which makes me laugh when you talk about Pluto going through the 3rd
It
house.
just felt like this. I don't know why this vision came to my head. Like, how do I, because in astrology, what I find with most astrologers, they use a lot of analogies and metaphors. And I thought, you know, I'm not a great storyteller. I like things short and concise, but that just came to mind, this dance floor, and which planet am I dancing next with, you know? It was vivid. It was actually vivid.
Fantastic. And also in terms of the 3rd house being with regards to skills, you mentioned learning language, and did you develop other skills that you then applied in your business, or just in terms of what you would describe as life skills?
Well, I'm jack of all trades, master of all. I have done so many different works. I'm currently working in digital work, which is something that I've learned recently.
That's also very 3rd house.
Yes, so I'm doing that. I'm working with my family, with my nephew and my brother-in-law, so that's also 3rd house. I have worked in commerce, in business. I've done a lot of like entrepreneurial businesses, and yes, in the clothing industry, opening boutiques and manufacturing and retailing and wholesaling and production and all that. Yeah, and studying a lot of astrology. Yeah, I suppose that's most of the stuff that I've done.
Fantastic. What about going into now your 4th house? What do you expect?
I'm not sure, because I've just relocated. I thought, I really don't think I want to move again. Maybe I'm hoping that my kids will be moving closer to me, or I will be moving closer to them if I do have to move somewhere. Maybe create a home, maybe establish a family with a partner, or yeah, I don't really go there. I think also because it's the 4th house. So it's to establish myself somewhere. And I think now also my Saturn will be going into my 5th, and I'm going into my Saturn return. So in my previous Saturn return, I got married and I established life in a foreign country. So I maybe something on that kind of aspect.
Yeah, good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Camille, are you ready to share your experience of Pluto?
I am. I want to thank you two for being the first to talk. I can relate to both of your stories, and I love the vision of dancing in the stars with Pluto. I love working with imagery, and that was just, I love that. So yes, Pluto ingress in 2008 into my 3rd house. If I could divide my life in half, that would have been the starting point of my 2nd part of life. So in late 2007, I met a man, got pregnant, got married, and moved to Germany, had my first son. So this was all in 2008, completely learning the new culture, being away from my siblings, being away from my family for the first time, who I was very close to, and learning the new language. So it was this ingress was really abrupt and quite actual physically, okay, new environment and new communication skills, learning how to be a mom without my mom. So I have this cluster in my 12th house of Libra of Mars, Saturn, and Pluto. And then I have that squaring my moon at 15 degrees Cancer. And so in 2015, Pluto comes and opposes my moon. That was the first. So I've been working with the Pluto transits the last 7 years quite intensely. And it started here in 2015, Pluto opposing my moon. A couple months before the exact opposition, my sister passed away from ovarian cancer. And I was able to spend the last few months with her in California, which was a very spiritual experience for me and my family. But then I had to go back to Germany. And when I went back to Germany, that's where where I went into the darkness, really for the first time in my life. I started a relationship quite quickly with what I think of as like Hades seducing someone into the underworld, because I went actually with curiosity into this relationship with someone who was very, I would say dark, very like a lot of depression, addiction, and the relationship was verbally and emotionally abusive, codependent. So it was a lot of things. But again, it was like from the outside, I was like, I know what's going on, and I'll be okay. I'm just going to go down this road. And I did. It took me years to get out of the relationship, which I eventually did. So what was happening this whole time is then Pluto conjunct my South Node a couple years later. So then there was a T-square with Pluto on my South Node opposing my Moon and North Node, exactly squaring Saturn. And all that other, the Saturn, Pluto, Mars that I have in the 12th house. So it was a long process of being in the relationship and getting out of the relationship and really leaving for good. And that was really difficult for me to, it was all about like self-worth and putting myself first. And it was when I had my girls that it was a lot easier. When it was for my girls that it was easier to leave and stay gone, because it was more for someone else, and I wasn't going to have, I knew I was going to be able to take care of them in a more healthy environment. But so yeah, this is the whole process was just ended in 2022 when Pluto finally left for the third time the square to Pluto. So it was just a series of this T square and the opposition with the North Node, South Node axis. And it's just very recent where the last pass over my South Node, no, the last pass over the square to Pluto. So the process of getting out of the relationship, but also then getting out of like the aftermath of the fear of just a lot of fear from of authority and men, and not being able to say no, not being able to voice my opinions or needs or wants, and really always I was living from that subordinate role my whole life. And so it was a big breakthrough to finally be like, okay, I can learn how to not be that person. I can learn how to say no, and this is what I need. I'm going to do it for myself. So it was a long process. Okay. Now, another process through the whole time was battling addiction for myself with alcohol. And it was always kind of going in and out. It was just this little thing in my brain. Even if I wasn't drinking a lot, there was a very unhealthy relationship there. At times I was drinking a lot. Then I had my girls and I was pregnant and breastfeeding, but it was always these chains, really. I felt like kind of like with this relationship, or just a relationship, not with this specific person, but with like this authority male figure that I put myself in this subordinate role of. It was all in my imagination, really. And it came while Pluto was squaring Pluto, like waking up one day and really seeing the different perspective, like, no, I can take the chains off. Actually, it's all an invisible, it's this different perspective that I'm seeing. I can wake up and not have just this freedom. But before I could logically think, no, they don't have any control over you. But it was really just this process of, wow, okay, I feel it. I can embody the fact that those things don't have power over me. And of course, it wasn't just coming because Pluto was squaring Pluto. There was years of therapy, working with meditation and ancestry and ritual and learning astrology. I learned astrology also during this time when my first daughter was born, and having the time to go in and reading the myths, reading the fairy tales, and understanding and putting that perspective to my life, and being able to slowly build these ideas. But then it really was like an awakening of, oh, okay, I can put myself first. And I actually want to, and I'm at the point now where for the first time in my life, I'm not looking for a romantic partner. That's not what I believe will bring me out of, it's gonna make me happy and give me everything I always wanted, which was when I was a little girl. It was this romantic partner that was my number one. It's what I was gonna do anything for. And now it's like, what if I don't put my energy there? What if I wanted to go and explore all these things I'm very passionate about? And of course, I have my energy going to my children and my home. But if I do have extra energy, not like, ooh, oh, maybe I'm going to meet someone and we're going to get together. So the first time in my life that really, it was like an awakening. It was a revelation of, I could be a mom and be enough for my kids, and not this idea of I need to find a role model for my girls. And it's like, so it was also this just like a new way of seeing where my life wants to go for me, and not looking out for someone else to complete me or save me or support me. Just like, oh no, okay. And so also last year I got into the fitness and health field. I went back to school and I love it. And And I get into a lot of things and really, really love them and get really all excited about them. That's what I'm doing right now. Really excited for, yeah, that last pass over Pluto square, but also getting ready for, like Ronit just went through, Pluto will be conjunct my Venus in a couple years. But it's like now that you know the symbolism is there, it's like you can welcome that dance and not be scared of it, because it's like something's going to happen. We could never predict what is. You can show up in different ways, but it's exciting because, you know, when you get to the other side, it's like you are transformed. You are feeling all the lessons one by one are coming, being resolved somehow. And even if it's dirty and scary, of course, you're going to get through it somehow, get to the other side, and then ready for the next hit from whatever it is. So Pluto going into my 4th house will be, I have the Venus at almost 2 degrees Aquarius. But yeah, I would love to relocate. This is absolutely a dream of mine, but also at the same time, I'm trying to be open to whatever. If it is Germany I end up in, then so be it. But I never felt really comfortable here. It's been quite a struggle for me to culturally, or for whatever, vibrationally frequent, like the frequencies of me and in Berlin. You know, Berlin is huge, just in the middle of the city. And but for reasons like I co-parent my son with my ex-husband, and there are other reasons why I'm staying here for now. But I do dream of being in the country and being more in nature, being in an English-speaking country again. We'll see. But again, like I said, I'm kind of just really open to being okay wherever I'm at, and not like, I'm going to move to Scotland and it's going to be great. And instead, like, okay, take it one day at a time and appreciate all the things I have here. So relocating would be awesome in the next 20 years. And what I would love, what I ask Pluto to come with me is on a journey more into my ancestry, and working kind of like through meditation and ritual, communicating with ancestors and doing deep work with them. So that's kind of what I have my eyes set on for the next few years when Pluto goes.
That's really appropriate for the 4th house, isn't it? That really strikes out that chord with the 4th house. And also, you mentioned Pluto square, and then the therapy that you've been doing over the years. And I find that when Pluto goes through either really hard aspects to itself or to personal planets, it's just the most incredibly enriching time to do inner work. And same with Pluto going through the 4th, I found people have just dug really deep into whatever it is that is preventing their happiness, or, you know, making them not feel at home in their life.
And it's fascinating too, and through astrology to kind of see where you have the hard aspects, or where you can go and understand. Like for me, it was a lot of understanding where, not even where it's coming from, but it's there, you know, whether it's past lives or just childhood. You got, you know, it's still showing up. So it was a lot for me with this authority and being scared. I would be intimidated, you know, to talk in German to my child's teacher, because I put myself in this and I get anxious and I feel it in my body and like have to prove myself, or, you know, on different levels. And I just, or even customer service with a German on the, because the customer service in Germany isn't like in America. Like, we are not number one. So it's like, they're yelling at me and I'm just trying to figure out. But I, you know, so every day it comes up when I was going through this work, this authority thing of like every day kind of being hit in the face, until I had to be like, no, wait, I am strong and I can talk back if I need to, or whatever the situation. Was really the change in perspective and putting myself and even at the beginning, just acting or pretending that I have this confidence, but it is a big thing in confidence is what I'm still working on, and what I really think will change in the future as far as like attracting or being able to do the things I love. A lot, I felt held back a lot because I felt the lack of confidence or unworthiness for whatever reason.
And I think Pluto going through the fours, like what Travis had described in terms of his own experience, is really transformational in every regard of life. You know, like you personally and your sense of psychological and emotional sort of happiness, and then relationships and your career, all of those angles are going to be affected in a way that going through the third house you don't sense as much. So it has impact, but it's not sort of outer impact. It doesn't hit you so obviously in terms of all of the major ways that you interact in your life. It's a little bit more like internal processes that you're grappling with. Now I think you have that opportunity to change all of those areas of your life kind of in one go. Do you have planets in the 1st, 4th, 10th, and 7th?
4th, I have Venus at 2 degrees Aquarius and Mercury at 18 degrees.
Right.
And then I see at 27.
Right.
1st house Jupiter at 10 degrees.
Oh yeah, so that's also going to be.
And Uranus at 7th house on my DC. So it'll be hitting everything.
Yeah, so I'm guessing you're going to move in the next 20 years. Just
yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting too. I remember I had gotten into astrology in the middle of probably when Pluto was opposing my moon. And then so when I could see that what was coming up, it's going to be in this T-squared north node and south node, and then it's going to be, and it really was kind of this anxious, like, fuck, like I've already gone, I felt like I went through the shit already. My sister had passed away. I had went through a divorce. And then as it keeps developing, you get stronger and stronger. Like now it's like, whatever. I'm now looking forward. I know I don't like to predict what's going to be happening, but whatever it is, it's going to hit you and you're going to come back up. And so I'm excited. I was happy to hear Ronit's experiences she went through the Pluto conjunct Venus. And I would love to welcome in some deeper relationships with women in my life. Because of my last 2 relationships, I was really wrapped up in them and really had made little time to create a circle of community here in Berlin. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what's coming up.
Excellent. All right, so I'm going to just explain a little bit about my experience, which overlaps incredibly with Ronit and Camille, a little bit less with Travis, but still. And it's that transformational aspect of Pluto where you really start to get complete and utter, you're just faced with all of the worst possible fears that you personally need to experience. That's the thing. It's not like random fears from out there, Hollywood style. It's what you need to grow. And this is one thing I really 100% realized in going through all of these last 14 years, because if I had any doubt about how these planets worked before that, I fully stand by it now. Like the capacity for the birth chart to show its promise through these really strong transits is, I think, magnified by Pluto. And so, and also for people who are challenged by this idea of Pluto changing signs and going into X or Y house or affecting one or another planet, it's important to recognize what your birth chart is made of first before you project too much into the next aspect of your life, the next phase of your life. because some charts are, designed to have certain lessons, and others will have very different lessons. So going through one particular part of your chart may be much less noticeably challenging than others, and that will always refer back to your natal chart. Like you were describing the reactions with the planets. I have first house moon, and so Pluto has been in Cancer, and Pluto has been going through my 7th house since 2007, and it was virtually right away that I actually ended up separating with my husband of 15 years when it moved into that house. And it had been brewing in the months before, but it was kind of like done, just done. We're done, move on. And like Ronit, you were saying about how sudden things are, how absolute and sudden things are. It was really like that. There was no question, no doubt in my mind that that's what I needed to do. And then as that carried on, it was in a semi-sextile to my Venus. So I have Venus at 2 degrees 17 minutes of Aquarius, so close to Camille's Venus. And so I'm also going to get this. I've been listening very attentively to Ronit. Who knows? And so when Pluto would have been in a square to my midheaven and IC, roughly approaching the square and coming back and forth, when I met somebody who was incredibly karmic, and also it was squaring my Mercury when it first entered in. So I have a 29:43 minute Mercury in Pisces. And so that was already squaring for some time. And then it seemed like when it squared my IC, I met this guy who was just one of those deeply karmic relationships where it was a question, no doubt we knew each other before. There was just all kinds of incredible coincidences and an immediate attraction, an immediate impulse to be together. And it turned out to be just a fatal attraction, just one of those absolute freaking nightmare relationships, where to the extent that it took me a while to realize, but he was a pathological liar. And so Pluto in the 7th for me, and I've seen this a lot with my clients, is very much about finding our power in relationship to others, and especially within relationships, important relationships. So not just, in social environment, but in our relationships with the people that matter the most. And boy, did I get that lesson. I have mostly water in my chart, no earth. My North Node is in Taurus, so that's as earthy as I get. And well, I guess I've got Pluto and Uranus in Virgo, so there you go. But it still doesn't give me enough of a boundary. So I'm sort of a free floating thing, and so the idea of that over giving, over allowing, and not heeding my intuition was the big lesson I had to learn then. And I realized that I had been pretty fortunate up until that point not to have met people like that, because I think I would have been in much worse shape. But yeah, I lost everything. We had an investment. I thought we had an investment. It's very possible, I don't know to this day what actually happened, but it's very possible that he had a gambling addiction and that he was taking my money. And I thought it was going towards the retreat center that I thought we were building, but in fact, it just kept disappearing. So if you've seen what's it called, the Tinder Swindler on Netflix, that I actually watched that, and I had this moment of realization, because I kind of knew what had happened to me, but when I saw it in the form of the Tinder Swindler, I just thought, wow, that is literally what happened. And I could see the buildup and I could see the collapse. And I realized just exactly what I'd gone through. And that was years later, because this is from 2010 and 11. So that was a huge experience. And I also then, and so very soon after, I just had to break off all contact. I couldn't, it was just getting to be intolerable, because he would keep coming back and trying to promise to make things right and promise to it was just, went on and on and on, where there was just this incredible drain on my energy. So the financial stress started very powerfully from 2011. And I ended up burning out in early 2013. And that was roughly the very very beginning of Pluto opposing my moon. So the burnout was about a 1.5-year process, and it almost exactly corresponded with Pluto going back and forth over my moon, which is 12 plus of Cancer. And there I also learned the boundaries. The thing about overgiving is not just with individual relationships, but in all kinds of ways. And I started to reorganize my business. So 7th house represents clients as well. It represents how you work with people. And I had to start to reorganize the way that I made myself available to people, because I made myself available on their terms instead of on mine. So I stopped accepting phone appointments, because people would start telling me what's going on the phone already. So like trying to get an appointment before getting an appointment. And so I stopped all that. I put everything online. I created like a kind of a 24-hour minimum cancellation policy, where before people would cancel at the last minute and I'd be like, okay. And it was a huge strain on top of another huge financial strain. And so then I just started to make these systematic changes. And it had to come, in my case, it doesn't probably have to always come like this, but it had to come from me being so obviously taken advantage of in so many ways that it just kept showing up again and again and again in so many themes. And the itch, by the way, with Pluto going near and over and then back over my moon, I also had this massive desire to move, but I was unable. I was just too weak. My kids were still young. They were just starting high school, and I was too weak to even think of moving. So that was just kind of a frustration that remained there. And then I also realized that in many ways, my relationship with my mother changed as well with that opposition, where we'd always had a pretty good relationship. But I think in many ways, she actually started to see me, in a way that I think she didn't before. And to actually have, rather than be anxious for me, to actually have empathy, which was a very different way of relating. Because I was getting so exhausted by everybody freaking out at my state, because I was that person that was the pillar for everybody else. So it's exhausting always having to also, defend against everybody else's freaking out when you're not well. And that also had me just in every aspect of my life realize how boundaries are so important. It was just amazing in the sense that it worked for me, showed me that issue, but also for my clients, where I was able to turn that knowledge into something very proactive or very useful for the people that I work with. Now, as we speak, in the last few weeks, I've had Pluto conjunct my descendant, and it's really been exact. In 10 days ago, it was exact. It's roughly still a few minutes of an arc degree away. And I was contacted by just a remarkable man, and just out of the blue, this person contacted me. I was on an app, but it was kind of like I was ignoring it. I was on Hinge for ages, but it was just so dire. In my age group, it's not, the pickings are really slim. And so it was so dire. I was just like, oh. And so every now and then you'd get a little thing popping up. And I just this day looked at it, and I just was immediately, energetically, completely shaken. And I thought the last time with the person who I met in a dramatic, I met that other person at the teachings of the Dalai Lama. So I was projecting all kinds of things onto him in terms of his spiritual advancement and so on. None of it was true. And so this time I was like, okay, we're doing the astrology right up front. And I think I might have mentioned to you before that the reason I started really studying astrology was because of that guy who stole all my money and took advantage of me.
Oh.
And I relied too much on other people's rather pie in the sky interpretations of our relationship. And this time I went through it with a fine-tooth comb. Upfront, I was like, give me your date, your time, and your place of birth. And we're getting serious. And so the astrology is just extraordinary. I should actually ask you to verify that, because I might have two Neptunian eyes looking at it. But so that's my story of Pluto going through hell and back with relationships. And at the very end, because my ascendant is 29 Cancer, so right now over this descendant, which it is going to go back and forth over, I am having a truly remarkable relationship. And it's so it feels extremely real. It feels in a way that the other felt more like a fairy tale. This feels very real. And I think if I hadn't gone through the hardship of all of the comings and goings, I wouldn't even know what that would feel like, that reality of a relationship. So then if we look at Pluto going into Aquarius and my 8th house, where my Venus is sitting, then that starts to get really terrifying. So that's what I have to look forward to, but I don't dare give any more detail than that. But my Venus is unaspected in my chart. Venus is there hanging out in the 8th all by herself. And so she's sextile Mercury, so it's not entirely unaspected, but it's out of sign sextile 3 degrees. And so that's it pretty much that I'm looking forward to. It's kind of looking into the potential for real, genuine relationship again after 10 years, and being deeply committed to that. And also with the 8th house, given the astrology aspects of it, the occult stuff, that's for me, that's a given as well. Just really going deeper into all of this and developing that as much as I can. So so there we are. What I'd like to do is have a look at what you feel collectively we're going to experience now with Pluto going into Aquarius, because obviously this is going to be a really unique time in our collective experience. We do have this Saturn-ruled Pluto, so it's still going to be under Saturn's influence, but now Saturn is moving away from its house, so it's going to be ruling from a very different energy. So if you have anything you want to say about that, then do share. Maybe we'll go back to Travis. Do you want to start and just say what you might think you'll be looking out for?
Well, I already mentioned some of the things I was thinking about, but some other stuff I wrote down was maybe astrology becoming more mainstream. And then I like to think there's something with aliens is going to show up. But...
I think you're probably right. I agree with that in terms of it's probably not going to be what we used to think aliens were, but I think there's been an increasing contact with foreign bodies, foreign energies. So I think you're right there. And also the very first time, so Pluto is going to be opposing the very first time that the US government made a record of a sighting of an alien sighting, which happened in 1947. I can't remember the date, but it was Pluto and Leo. And so that's now being kind of challenged in some ways. So kind of shows up in by opposition as something that's going to be different, because it was all hidden before, and now they're starting to open up and share what is being found and seen. So yeah, I think
with that web satellite that they launched recently, who knows what that might pick up.
Yeah. And also, I think we're at a stage now with Pluto going into Aquarius where people are ready to acknowledge that what we have been looking for was too much of what we think we look like. And so there might be also a broader idea of what alien life is. Like this, we've been looking with such a specific idea of what we wanted to find, that maybe we'll be able to have an awareness of what is out there that is also life, but doesn't look like anything we knew up until this point. Because I do think this Aquarius energy is always very forward thinking. It's very different. It's like information opens up in new and creative ways when we're in Aquarius. So I think that could be.
And like you said, with Saturn in Pisces, with that Neptune influence, and then Saturn making it real, I don't know, might be related.
Yeah, because Saturn is also in a more creative energy right now, more intuitive, more creative. So yeah, I think so. Any other alien watchers? What do you think?
I agree. I think that absolutely it will be undeniable. And then by the time in 20 years that, like you were saying too, seeing it through a different perspective, or I think more just this openness to galactic communication and different frequencies, and it having, yeah, the mainstream not being able to deny that anymore. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I feel is fascinating with Pluto's orbit, and so it was discovered in 1930 when Pluto was in Cancer. And so it's now in Capricorn opposing Cancer. So for the first time since it's been discovered, and looking at how long it is in the different signs. So it's the longest in Taurus for about 30 years and the shortest amount of time in Scorpio for about 12 years. And kind of like just reflecting a little bit what that could mean. And so, for example, in Scorpio, its energies are already there. So if something's being transformed through Pluto, that in the longer it's taking, then one can assume that, okay, it needs to be going deeper, that whatever is being transformed is a little more complicated, or it's needing more time. And now we're coming out of Scorpio, then Sag, I think it's there for 13 years. Capricorn was there for 15, and then it'll be there for 20 in Aquarius, and then longer and longer until it gets to 30 years in Taurus. So I just think, and so also in this, the retrograde motions are then more expanded. And because I was thinking, man, 2 years to go back and forth. I'm like, is this normal? Is that every time it ingresses? Is it a 2-year? So I looked at it, and every other ingress since Cancer, since it was discovered, it was only one short little back to 29, back to 28, and then really ingresses to the next sign. And so the transitions are a little bit more maybe apparent, or, humanity or society, the collective can really, okay, the shift has come. We're stepping into this new, whatever the transformation was. And now, and this is unique because also when it ingresses into Pisces, it'll only be one back into Aquarius quickly, and then it'll really stay into Pisces. So this time we have 2 whole going in and out. And so I just feel that that's like, okay, the paradigm shift is so intense that we need more, that this time is needing to be like negotiated, like, okay, coming back to this way, stepping a little closer to the ideas. For example, aliens and galactic beings, this is a huge paradigm shift for mainstream. And so something like that I just felt that that's fascinating, that this is unique to Capricorn into Aquarius, that's such a long back and forth between the retrograde.
Yeah, and it can be really helpful. It's like it can be really, I think it's necessary because there's so much junk to clear out from Capricorn. Mm-hmm. These last 14 years have shown us some intense things that I think previous generations and in previous years we took for granted around government and big business and so on. There was a kind of always a knowing that, corruption was there, abuse of power was there, all these other aspects that we've been looking at in the last 14 years, but it just became intensified now under Capricorn, and it's not done. that hasn't been cleaned out. And I think the next 2 years, 2023 and 2024, are part of that understanding, what are we going to tolerate going into a new version, and what are we really going to have to let go of or expose, fully, before we can have anything look different. So I don't think we'll get the full sense of difference before 2025.
Yeah.
Still going to be this kind of, and then there's that thing, and and there's this as well, and then this kind of going back and forth, like almost like dredging up a pond. It's like dredging up the bottom of an ugly pond. And it's in a way welcome, because it's kind of like, if it does shift and the energy shifts really fast, which Pluto can do, we won't really be we won't have digested, we won't have understood the lesson, and we carry stuff forward into the future. So what else did you have anything to add about the transits or the ingress?
I think it was interesting what you guys were talking about a little earlier with AI art. This has been on my mind the last couple of weeks, because it really brings up an emotion for me. The trending AI photos and selfies on social media. Okay, one sec. I feel it in my body of this kind of disgust, and why am I getting kind of so angry about this? What is it about that I really kind of repulsing, or just not accepting? And then at this, but anyway, it's just kind of been on my radar of what is it going to look like. I've got to go for a minute.
Yeah, go ahead.
But this topic I've been thinking a lot about. Where are the lines? Where are the boundaries? And one of the things I love when I think about Pluto, that I read years ago, that I always go back to, is that Pluto reveals the extremes we are capable of. So Pluto reveals the extremes we are capable of if we don't set boundaries. So if we don't set boundaries, can be really no boundaries, right? With AI is just out there and going, and now the lines blurred between artists and or whatever the situation. I don't understand how they do it in universities anymore, when AI can write your paper, or on dating apps, or you're dating, or if you're texting people, you can Google whatever, or there have apps of being funny, or whatever situation is not. Where is the person? Where's the persona? What's the AI, and what is that going to look like in 20 years is a little bit creepy, but also it's just like, okay, it's out there, it's going, and so we'll all see when it does come up what that looks like. But it makes me sad to think of I have an artist friend who lost a job because the guy said, oh, never, I'm going to do my album cover through this AI app, and it's great, and I love it. And she's like, oh, okay. And like, that's just the very beginning. That's just one tiny little example of like, okay,
but it's a real example. It happens here. It's going all over the artistic world. That's why I think it's also a bit of an issue that we're going to confront in the next couple of decades, because we are now in a situation where you can't really trust what people are bringing forward. It's got to the point, I was reading a few weeks ago, that universities have already started to go back to the old-fashioned way of handwriting exams, just so that they can prove that the students have actually done the work themselves. And the same thing, they've gone back to oral exams. So people stand in front of a panel and actually, just like the good old days, just defend your thesis, or defend your paper, or explain what you know live and in person, so that you can't get away with it. Because these the chat AI, I think, has already got a Wharton business diploma. It has it's made entrance exams in all of the big universities. It's just had all of these incredible accomplishments simply because of information that it can track on the internet. And there's already quite a lot of fraud of people putting claiming skills and talents that they don't have. And this puts it to the nth degree now.
Yeah.
It's those polarities, those two extremes of Pluto, where it's like either handwriting or it's AI. Yeah, I think that's going to be a big one, a really big one. So do you need to attend to the girls, or do you can?
I will, and I'll be
as long
back.
as it works. Okay. I just wanted to also, for the in general, I wanted to just read out some of the keywords that I had written down then for Pluto, and that was transformation, power, depth, and the depths, going into the depths of earth or depths of despair, crisis, surrender, overcoming, birth and rebirth, life cycles, and willpower, power in general, power over, power under, power within, etc. And then Pluto in Aquarius is like collective power, and the power of the mob. So it's not, I find there's quite a lot of idealism around this whole Pluto in Aquarius and the whole notion of Aquarian age, which is a bit vague. The Aquarian age for me is not something I feel like I can work with. It's just too vast and too vague. And so I think when Pluto goes into Aquarius, we have to look at the more grounded aspects of Aquarius, because collectively things don't tend to go as fluidly or as well or as ideally as they do individually. With any shift, with any outer planet particularly, but groupthink, hive mind, this is very Aquarian as well. And I do think there's going to be a big rise in, like we've already seen a big rise in scientism and this overly superficial dependence on science and missing the actual point of science being a deep inquiry into the truth, not looking for an answer, but looking for the truth. And that's one of the fundamental characters of Aquarius. And, truth seeking, regardless of the outcome, is Aquarius, but it can also be perverted. And it's very likely to be, I think, with Pluto going through. And it becomes, again, it's that extreme. And Pluto and Saturn do not get along. And we've already seen that with Capricorn. We're going to see it again collectively more through groups and associations now with Aquarius. But it's kind of like, I can't remember who said this, but we'll go from the big daddy of Pluto in Capricorn to the big brother of Pluto in Aquarius. And so then we have this sense of suspiciousness around community, so there'll be within different communities suspicious behaviors or just a feeling of, can I really trust you? And
controlling as well.
Yes, exactly. And
like I think
from within.
I think
well
like I've read somewhere about visas that now you have to apply online when you move between European countries. So even like things like that is controlling the community to make order.
Yeah.
In the
and
collective.
I think we will definitely be seeing more of that very quickly, I think, because even like the WHO has been talking about health passports that are globalized health passports. And what that means is then, you want to travel somewhere, you have to have this, that, and the other thing. And keeping in mind that the WHO is not just this very friendly international organization. It is a private-public partnership, and it's pretty much run by private business in all the different areas of its mandate, but most especially through big pharma. And so this is something to keep in mind, because we have to be aware that these things are potentially there, so that we can start to act in whichever way we feel is necessary at the local level, starting there, working within our national units, and we're working within and that's another thing that I think will change, is this whole issue of national unit, like this whole idea of what is a community, and extended all the way out to nationhood, and then regional actors, and then global citizenship. I do think that's going to be under major pressure. A lot of the international organizations that began a kind of a collective feeling of like, let's work together under Pluto and Leo, are going to be under major pressure in the first 10 years of this transit, really very powerfully up until 2032. So I think this is a big deal, that whole notion of ID, electronic ID, tracking people, skip the cards, we'll put it right in your brain, the transhumanist movement, because what we've always seen is that the whatever has been building up at the time of the ingress is always the thing that becomes most powerfully, you know, before the ingress of Pluto into Capricorn, there was a lot of financial instability and there were a lot of housing markets that were under real threat. And that just, as Pluto moved in, just exploded in a way that was global and very, very challenging for so many people. So all of those things that are already on the radar are the things that are going to be peaking in the next couple of years. And then we'll see which direction it takes.
Do you think that all the cryptocurrencies, all the virtual currencies are going to be controlled by central banking system when Pluto ingresses into Aquarius?
I get that feeling because the original purpose of Bitcoin was to be an independent coin, that it was supposed to be an independent currency that people could bypass governments, bypass any kind of authority. But the truth is that it's very difficult to convert that to actual things. You know, if you want to buy food using Bitcoin, you have to, it actually takes days. The process itself takes days to just extract your Bitcoin and turn that into something that you can use to buy an apple. And so that's in a period of 14 years, because Bitcoin started just as Pluto ingressed Capricorn. It's exactly then. And so that process has not improved at all. And what's happened is it's turned out to be much more of an investment unit than a currency unit. And so for all of the very idealized talk of this as a currency, it's not borne fruit. And too many of the other currencies are also weak and fluctuating in a way that is really difficult to use on a day-to-day basis. And so you get people hoarding. And so this is actually going against the original idea. And I think because of that pressure, because of the lack of fungibility, the lack of capacity to exchange that currency, there's going to be a big pressure zone, just like there was with the housing bubble. And I think there are other housing bubbles that are on the horizon, but this bubble, the Bitcoin bubble, is definitely going to burst. And I think it's going to be in the way of hyper control, so that we end up again with that polarization, just like between handwriting and AI. We're going to have a polarization between sort of barter or like you bake a cake and I'll give you 2 hours of babysitting or whatever. You're going to have this barter. And then on the other extreme, you're going to have hoarding, and you're going to have money in virtual forms, but only accessible to a certain type of person or a certain collective. It doesn't seem to me to be a solution. If it were, I think it would have worked already. And I also think, you might call this a conspiracy, but I've seen so many things that are real, genuine conspiracies. And one of them is this whole FTX breakdown. Looks like something that was almost planned, because there was so much heavy interest in terms of politics and government, and there was so many people looking away from how bad this organization was, the people who could have prevented this getting so far, and who were not paying attention. So either they're just really that full of hubris and not really paying attention at all, which is terrifying, or they were doing it deliberately and allowing the whole thing to collapse, because that way there's an in to be able to say, now you see, we need more regulation. Only the government can do this. And still, even in that context, we still don't have a usable currency. you know, and I know that for briefly, there were big things that people were accepting Bitcoin for. You could buy a Tesla at one point, but even Elon Musk has said, no, we're not doing that anymore. You know, so if you start to look at how things are actually materializing from where they were hoping to be, or where they were, what the original game plan was, I don't think that if after 14 years it has emerged in the culture in a widespread way, that it's actually going to be successful in the next 20 years. There will certainly be some kind of electronic money, but I don't think it's going to look like Bitcoin thought it would. What do you think about that? Does anybody have a Bitcoin? Are you Bitcoin people? No. No. Yeah, and that's another thing to be really for those who are into investing and money and so on. Be very careful now in these next 2 years, particularly. The U.S. dollar is extremely volatile. The U.S. dollar is it's very vulnerable right now. It used to be the gold standard, supported the dollar up until 1971. And at that point, largely due to the Vietnam War, the U.S. was unable to back its debt by gold. And so they had to pull the gold standard and just start printing money. And we've gone now through 51 years of that printing money. Hasn't gone very well. And now we're coming up on, and that won't be, I think, until 2025 or 2026 exactly, but we're already approaching the opposition of Pluto to the Bretton Woods Agreement, Pluto. And Bretton Woods was in 1994. It was July 22nd, 1994. That was when the IMF and the World Bank and the US as the reference currency were established. And so from that point, from 1994, the US dollar was like the global reference fund. Everybody would do all transactions in the dollar. Many countries now in this Pluto and Capricorn era, but is in an accelerated way in the last few years, have been pulling out of that and have been starting to establish, aiming to establish regional organizations that will take them out of the US dollar zone. And it's increasing literally weekly. There are new countries that are entering into this. So you have the BRICS, which was a response also to overreach by the West. So the BRICS is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and then South Africa. And now BRICS is also including a number of other countries, including Saudi Arabia, and Thailand, Malaysia, I think, is another applicant. And so these are major countries, hundreds of millions of people. It's a huge collection of people with a lot of resources. African countries, aside from South Africa, are also applying. And these resources, I think this will be a big Pluto and Aquarius thing, is nationalizing resources. Because it's, again, a collective issue where there has been a lot of pushback against nationalization of resources. And that's one of the bigger problems that the US has internationally, is that it creates conflicts wherever countries are trying to hold on to their resources. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that. I think also with regards to China, the way the Chinese Republic moon is at, I think, 5 degrees of Aquarius. I think it's something like that. Is it 3 or 5? I can't remember exactly off the top, but that's also coming up 2025, 2026. And I think that is where we're going to have a really big issue. The US is already talking about war. We're seeing this crazy hype around things being blown out of the sky. Like, that's just one other way that they're trying to instigate war, trying to instigate hatred, fear, try and create this kind of sense of being under attack. This has been going on since the beginning of man, that these events are designed to stimulate fear, to get people angry enough to go to war. And now Russia is already underway, and now China is the next one. So I think a war with China in the second half of the 2020s is very, very likely. And if it's not an actual war, like what we're experiencing here between NATO and Russia, I think it will be a very powerful economic war. And this is where the US dollar, because it's fragile already now, because it's losing value and it's also losing the backing of major economies, I think the US dollar collapse is going to happen in the next couple of years as well. So I'd say between now and the end of 2024. So that's very important in terms of like our global networks. It was just kind of underlying all international transactions. It was just there. And now that's changing. You know, Pluto is going to go in and blow all these things up in a way that is unexpected. We won't, I think, have something obviously to replace it in the early part. It'll be probably crisis first and then a solution to the crisis. In the same ways the housing bubble was like crisis and what to do, and then the solution comes in. And of course, the challenge is, this is still a Saturn-ruled Pluto, and the challenge is that, you know, are we going to get the same top-down solution to the crisis that works for some people and not for most? So, yeah, it's tricky.
Do you think, because it's moving from an earth sign to an air sign, it will be more spoken, it will be more, you will hear about it, whether maybe when it was in earth sign, it was more hidden and not so much exposed?
Yeah, on the one
like
hand,
with the WHO and all that.
The only challenge there is that we're in a time right now, and it's already been ongoing for a long time, but we are in an accelerated period. And this is, I think, also what Pluto and Aquarius really will represent. We're in a period of what is known as 5G warfare, fifth generation warfare, which is using real deep psychology and manipulation to change people's way of thinking, and also including inciting hatred and inciting division. Social media was not created for that purpose, but it has served that purpose beautifully. And 5G warfare is the problem there. So however much access people have to information, the 5G warfare comes in, and one of the hallmarks of it is that they use a grain of truth. And so there's a minor revelation of the thing that you think is the problem, but then there's a major propaganda around it that either deflects from it or completely distorts the story. And we see this, unfortunately, as what most people receive as information comes through that, and that is including Hollywood films and television. TV series often predict things. If you go through movies and television and so on, we know that the Pentagon and the CIA actually have offices in Hollywood. Like they have film departments and they work. It's no surprise, it's no mystery why Top Gun, of all things, has been produced on the eve of war with Russia. Because that need to hype up this hyper nationalism, which is another Pluto in Aquarius energy, hyper nationalism, and this jingoism that was part of that film, what the role of that film was to prepare this whole frenzy around what seems to have been, the problem with Russia. And that allowed the whole scenario to be dominated in people's unconscious by this idea of, we're the heroes and they're the villains. And this is where, we need to take action. And unfortunately, that is so powerful that although people will have access to more information, I don't think they're actually going to be able to find their way through the mass of information that is there. And this is the other question with AI, which is only going to be answered, as we go through it. I don't think we have any way of preventing this, is who is controlling what the right answer is. So you have a massive censorship. Censorship, again, this is another thing that is Pluto in Aquarius for me. This is going to be censorship on steroids. The first time we had political correctness, that was Saturn moving into Aquarius in the early 90s, just 89 to 91. It kind of grew out of that. out of that era, at 92 up till 94 or something like that. And now we're seeing that on steroids. We're seeing that hyper correct way of thinking, of calling somebody, of discussing subjects. You've got people who are policing each other in terms of individual morality in a way that is actually much more powerful than what even the government could ever do, or any kind of other organization. So I do see this is going to be something that we're grappling with for a long, long time to come. So yeah, the question is that we are here to, in terms of our, human experience, we're here to understand what I call the truth of our experience. And that truth of our experience is not connected to what our thinking is. It's not connected to the mind and opinions and beliefs and so on. It's there, it's an inherent. And I see that as the only solution to all of this mind messing with the mind, because the mind is
Leo in the opposite of Aquarius, and that's the heart, and maybe that's part of the solution to all the mental.
But the challenge with Leo is also that it represents leaders. It represents people in power, pinnacle of power, kings and presidents and stuff like that. So the question is, which aspect are we drawing on? So yeah, there's definitely the polarity point, and the solution is but the solution is in the highest manifestation of the polarity point. And that's difficult for people to access if they're not able to touch on their own sense of what is right and wrong, which has been so distorted, I think, and it will be increasingly so when Pluto goes into Aquarius. Because Aquarius is wonderful. It's got this unbelievably humanitarian energy, this very deep humanity. But one of my favorite sayings for Aquarius, for me, it just sums it up so beautifully, is that it's really, it loves humanity and hates humans. And this is the biggest problem with Pluto in Aquarius, is because we're in a situation where we have literally groups of people who feel that this world is overpopulated. And that we have also, that's part of the 5th generation warfare, is to be convinced that there's too many of us and some of us are just going to have to go. And, we'll, I guess, draw straws, or I don't know how that's going to look. It's already kind of happening there. We can see different ways that that's already happening. But the point being that, when people start believing that, then we start getting more fear. And then you start getting the lower vibration of Aquarius, which is very much about clustering groups and cult behavior. I think there's going to be an incredible rise in cults. I think there's going to be a massive rise in political splintering and cultish type thinking, from the sort of people who are like survivalists all the way through to people who are mega wealthy and wanting to live in some bubble on an island somewhere. There's going to be this like pockets of people that don't interact, that don't connect, based on so much of that fear of the other. And that is unfortunately related to the underside, or the more challenging side of Leo, which is selfishness. So Aquarius can be just a mirror for that Leo selfishness as well. So of course it's the aim would be, for an individual to think in terms of their heart and connection, but it's going to be a battle for our minds, I think, with Pluto and Aquarius. I think we're going to have to work extra hard to remember who we are, and not allow ourselves to be manipulated in terms of the how do I feel about people? Why do I hate these people? Why do I actually even know who they are? Like asking these questions to just keep recentering ourselves and remembering that maybe some of the ideas that we think we have are not our ideas. They're ideas that have been kind of presented to us as de facto truths, and we're just absorbing that. So beware, I think, is the key word for Pluto and Aquarius. I really feel, I would love to be optimistic and say we're all going to join some kind of wonderful global cult, and we're all going to ascend and consciousness will arise and suddenly everybody's going to become aware. and I just don't see it. And I think the problem with people who there is a potential for people to want that so badly that they will not participate in solutions in what's going wrong. And basically not participating is a form of violence, so like withdrawing yourself from society is also a kind of a form of violence to society, because it's kind of like saying, it's an illusion of separateness. It's an illusion that we could even separate ourselves out from society. Like, this just, where would you go? We all depend on each other. We depend on nature. We depend on all of this that sustains us. And then to think, oh, it's not my problem. I'm higher, I'm in a different spiritual realm. I don't want to get into all that stuff. That is, it's like a cancer cell in the hole. And that's the problem with that, is because it's this very, what on the surface appears to be very high-minded thinking, very spiritual thinking. It's not likely that people will question that as if it were a problem, but it's a big problem. The way that we survive in terms of humanity is to pitch in and to be connected to each other and not to abandon each other, and especially not have this illusion of superiority, because that again this is the one challenge with Aquarius that people often miss, is that there is this kind of this equality is definitely one of the aspirations of Aquarius, and this feeling of fraternity and getting along and so on. But it's like with Animal Farm, it's like we're more equal than others. There's some that are more equal than others. And, like in Canada, Prime Minister is known as primus inter pares, which means that he's like the first among equals in the Parliament. So it's like, in principle, the Parliament is all the same. The Prime Minister is just the first of all of the rest that are the same, but it's like, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can dress it up and make it sound beautiful. It sounds better in Latin, but it doesn't work. And it's really good to go back and read Orwell. It sounds really trite, but Animal Farm tells us a lot of what we're living through right now. And that's based on something that has already been experienced in our humanity, in our history. That was that Pluto in Cancer era. Pluto, it would be Pluto in Cancer going into Pluto in Leo that book was written. And so there's something I think we can learn from that literature that's going on right now.
It's a thing to question what we're being shown or exposed to, and think about what is the truth, and take everything with a grain of salt.
And that's the thing about Aquarius, is it's very intellectual. Like, the capacity to do that is definitely there. It's something that we need to, part of the message of Aquarius is individuation as well. And when you individuate sufficiently, and Pluto helps with individuation, when you individuate sufficiently, you also feel courageous enough to question what's going on. You don't care what other people think of you. You're like, wait, what? What did you just say? What are you thinking of doing? And when you do that, you're not only, you're stepping out, in a way that appears to be separate from the crowd, or appears to be going against the crowd, but actually you're acting on behalf of, because there's this kind of the sheeple, the sort of masses that are not questioning, that are going along, because that's another one of the aspects of Aquarius is very strong, is this tendency to do what everybody else is doing, with a sense, a mistaken sense that you're doing it very differently, but you're fitting in. Like, if you see the punk movement, they're all dressing like, they're all punks. We know they're punks because they dress like punks. But so then their notion internally is, we're standing out, we're different to the rest of society, but all they've done is splintered from society, creating a new one. So this is this idea of questioning that actually is appearing to be separate from society, but actually is pro-social. And it's saying, wait a minute, is it really a good idea what we're planning here? Is this really good for all of us? Wake up, people. Is this actually what you want to see? So yeah, this questioning is definitely inherent in Aquarius, this intellectual understanding. And it can be overly intellectual, like to the point of almost that sort of autistic, super uber bright way of looking at things, but without being able to connect that to an emotional center. And so we get like this kind of technology that's overrunning people, this transhumanism, which is another big concern for sure. I wanted to ask you also about my notes about religion. What do you think in terms of that? Do you see anything happening in terms of religious developments with Pluto and Aquarius?
I'm not sure, it'll be interesting because you have Saturn and Pisces. You'll have Saturn and Pisces and Pluto and Aquarius. I'm not sure what that might bring, but it seems like something could come of that.
Yeah, it does, because there's definitely there's an energy also of big social change that seems to also redefine what religion means to people.
Maybe
Ronit?
more mysticism, more towards mysticism and their cult and astrology, a lot more spiritual, as opposed to be this indoctrinated into a stream of religion as such.
Yeah, I see both are possible actually. The again, it's very difficult to say that you'll only get one or the other aspect of things, because what the trend seems to show is extreme religions now. Like we're seeing that becoming increasingly strong, whether it be in like super, what are they called? Super churches. There's some word for that. It's like these mega churches where there are thousands of people kind of in an auditorium, and the minister is like a rock star, you know, almost. And this is again this kind of cultish.
It was a trend in the 80s. I don't know if you recall.
Yeah.
And when they started the TV channel,
Yeah.
and he would have an auditorium filled with people that were like we used to call them like happy clappers or whatever, that joined in, and it's like became like more of a party, and it's a very much money driven industry. It's an industry. And I think it was in the 80s or the 90s, maybe late 80s.
At the 80s, yeah. But now what we're seeing is that taking over internationally as well. So that was prior to, let's say 20, 30 years ago, it was more of an American phenomenon, but it's now very much global. And you have these big Asian churches. I think the Moonies were also established very much in the 80s as well, and then in Africa. But what I'm looking at is this very perverse kind of overlap between the church and state in terms of how groups are being manipulated. And again, it comes back to this 5G type warfare, where once again, it's this insidious thing, which is like, is this real religion, or is this now some kind of psyops, or is it like, is this me being told how to think, or am I legitimately praising the Lord here? I think there's going to be a lot of extremes in that way, because we're seeing there's so much interference within countries that we saw, by the way, 250 years ago at the peak of when the missionaries started to move out, where originally the international movement was for trade, and then the church very quickly moved in and said, hey, we could do that. And then the church started sending missionaries out. And this is now the Pluto return of that trend that started in the late 18th century, where Christian missionaries would go out and try and, you know, transform entire cultures. And I think that seems to be swelling up again. So I think that's another thing I'm going to keep my eye on.
Maybe there will be a TV station or channel for astrology.
That'd be great.
That will be like
there is one. I think it's called YouTube.
Instead of having a YouTube channel, you have an actual TV channel that only does astrology or anything metaphysical, spiritual on that matter, you know?
Yeah, this is it. I think that splintering is going to have people go into their silos. It'll be like the spiritual silo and the astrology silo and I don't know, survivalist silo and the fascist silo or whatever. So I think that will continue to exacerbate. One of the things that I have noticed in my research from the past, from the historical perspective of Pluto and Aquarius, and also in terms of what is actually building up now, especially with regards to social media and AI even, and all of the things that sort of dehumanize us, or to a certain degree, yes or no. And one of those is the removal of our individual responsibility for things. And the fact that and this plays very strongly into Pluto and Aquarius as we go forward in the next few years, it's going to be this notion of people power, like the notion of mob rules, where you don't know who did it, but you know it happened. And there's like violence happening. It's like, well, who started? Well, we don't know. We were a gang. We don't know. And the thing that one individual would never do on their own, they would absolutely do if there were 1,000 people around them. And this is something that I see as a developing issue in Pluto moving into Aquarius, is this this tendency to continue down the path of lacking individual responsibility. And the problem is that there's a seductiveness in that, because people who don't want to take responsibility, or who are educated not to take responsibility, for example, will actually acquiesce, and they'll say, yeah, fine, you do it for me, you decide for me, I want convenience, give me the card that does everything, put the whatever, the thing in my phone, the app that's going to do everything. And that's where the slippery slope begins. So we become less and less humanized without realizing that, because everybody's doing it. And this was very prominent, we saw in 2020, with this incredible social pressure for everyone to be vaccinated, and very, very quickly people turning against each other, very quickly people ostracizing people. Very quickly, people thinking it was absolutely normal that your parents are dying and you can't go to the hospital and say goodbye, or that your child is dying and you can't go to the hospital and sit at their bedside. And then everybody's like, well, of course, it's COVID. And then you realize, well, wait a minute, this is serious, because that's just not normal. Like, I don't want to live in that kind of world. And I think the Pluto in Aquarius is going to exacerbate that tendency to constantly relativize and distance ourselves. We have to be aware is in the air now. It's something that's there. In all
that fear, and when people are afraid, they'll do things they normally would never do, whether that fear is real or not.
Absolutely, and a short way of describing Pluto is fear. What do you fear? Where is your fear? And now we've got Pluto fearing society. We've got Pluto fearing everyone else. We could see that through the French Revolution, for example, where there was just this chaos. First you have the revolution. It's like, finally, something changes. Now everybody's going to be better because the monarchy is gone. And then you have total chaos that became brutal. And people being murdered almost on hearsay, it was just a complete bloodbath. And I'm not suggesting that's going to happen. I'm just saying that this is also in the name of revolution, and that the idea overruns the collective. This is very Aquarian, that ideas become more important than people. With Pluto going in there, I think we're going to have big extremes in that regard once again. Because at the same time we've got Pluto in Aquarius, we're going to have Uranus in Aries. Pluto will be very quickly squaring the nodes as well, very soon in the second half of 2023, and then 2024, Pluto will be squaring the nodes. And Uranus is in Taurus rather, and then it goes from Taurus into Gemini. And historically for the US, Uranus in Gemini is very bad news. It's usually when things go really pear-shaped. So again, that's looking from 2026 and 7 and on. Then after that, it goes into Cancer. And I think it might not go into Leo, or it just goes into Leo before. I'm not sure if it gets that far. But so Uranus is going to be in a square when it goes into Gemini, and that's going to create a lot more tension as well. And it won't, I'm not sure if it reaches exact, but I have to check that out. I forgot to look for that. But this is going to be very volatile, I think, this decade coming, particularly. I don't even dare think about 30 to 40, 2030 to 40, but I think this particular decade is going to be quite volatile, to say the least. So individually, let's have a look. Oh, yeah, so I'm just checking my notes because I wrote so many things. Individually, I was saying that Pluto in Aquarius can help you find your unique way. So this is what I was getting at about the individuation, and keep checking every now and then. It's like, do I still share the values of this group? Like, I may have joined them a while back, but do I still want to be here? And or are they telling me what to do? And does that make me feel uncomfortable? This is one of the great things to pay attention to, is that if there is a some kind of omerta, or there's this kind of incapacity to question, you know that you're in a cult. Now you know you're in a cult. And this is what we were seeing in terms of science. So this is why it's more like a religion, that's scientism, rather than science. Science doesn't mind being questioned. And I think you have to look at that from a personal level as well as a collective level. Are we allowed to question? And more importantly, who's stopping us from questioning? Is it my neighbor? Is this like the Stasi of East Germany, or is this some faceless tech infrastructure, or the government working behind that? These will be important questions, I think. And then, so that way that we find our unique path is going to be described by the house that you find Pluto moving in your individual charts. But it's very important to, from the point of view of the best, let's say the best expression of Aquarius, is to be able to find your unique way, your unique path, and to live within the collective as your unique expression of self. And by doing that, we also feel we feel a responsibility for everyone to be able to have that freedom. Aquarius is all about freedom. And so as long as we don't have freedom, then we can't talk about a real society. You know, something else is happening there. The collective is something else is happening there. I think the beginning stage is going to be the hardest. The next few years will probably magnify everything in a polarized way, which is often the case. And that's not to say that we can't overcome. It's to say that it's probably just going to be more blatant, more obvious, but that things will start to become more clear, and then we get our kind of cruising speed up after a while. One thing I pointed out, and this is a collective thing as well as a personal thing, which reflects in social media, I think. I wrote that our modern ego has swelled since Pluto was in Leo. So that really is almost like you could draw the timeline from before Pluto in Leo and after Pluto in Leo, where prior to that, up until the Pluto in Cancer generation, people still very much thought collectively. You know, how can I be part of this community? How can I show up? How can I be responsible? And then Pluto in Leo was like, no, man, I want to be the star. I want to be noticed. I want my thing, my feelings, my expression to be primordial. And that generation, we can still see, they're still on stage. You can literally not get them off the concert circuit. They're 80 years old. Those rock stars with the Pluto and Leo generation, they're still making music because they still want to be seen so much. And that energy runs through our culture. It runs through our collective culture. And we see that expressed in Instagram and TikTok and so on, where it's become so focused on the individual. And because that narcissistic tendency has undermined the fabric of society, I think that itself is also going to be broken down, so that it's no longer going to be kind of socially acceptable to want to be that show-offy kind of narcissistic. Like people are, I think there will be an evening out of that in the next couple of decades, where the Pluto and Aquarius generations, the ones to be born in this time, but also us going through the experience of it, are going to start to realize we can't all be like this and be okay. Like, not everybody gets to stand out and be so special. It takes up way too much oxygen from the rest of us. So I think there will be this kind of, it'll be a bad look. Like in a couple of years, people will look back and go, oh my God, did you see those Instagram? Did you see those influencers? I think that's really one of the things that we can expect to change.
That's something I haven't thought about at all. I welcome that thought or that idea to.
Yeah. I'm kind of hoping. Yeah, and so this is also with Pluto going through Aquarius, because that narcissism naturally also comes with a social isolation. It comes from a separation, because you can't be the star without being above or different from. So there's, and then whether you're a star from your bedroom on TikTok or whatever, it still creates this feeling of individual or social sort of separation. And I think that is going to come to a head where that what we've seen in the last few years of this depression and social anxiety and real challenge in being separate from each other will become so unbearable that everybody sort of breaks down. Pluto is about breaking down, cracking things open, and people are like, I just want to be with people. I just need to be with people. And we come to a new understanding of what it is to be a society. So again, I think there's going to be an adversity event or some kind of challenge first, building up to this recognition of how important it is to be connected with people. That being individuated doesn't mean being isolated. That's a totally different thing.
People are always on their electronics, and there's no face-to-face anymore, and I think that's going to reach a point where Pluto comes in and knocks it down.
For me, it already has. I'm so done with Zoom. I mean, here we are, but I'm so done with Zoom.
It's good when you need it.
Yeah. I also wanted to just point out, from the point of view of Aquarian tendencies, is that the same thing that makes Aquarius incredibly visionary and incredibly inventive also makes it delusional and not seeing things realistically. And so I also think we can see very big issues around delusion. Not that we're not already, but I think that collective delusion becomes really a concern, largely because of this 5G warfare. I'm going to put some links in the show notes about 5G warfare, so people can read up about that. It's, I think, one of the most misunderstood things about what's going on socially in the last few decades. It's deliberate, and it's much more insidious and dangerous for us than overt warfare. You know what to do. If somebody's pointing a gun at you, you've got a choice there. You know what to do. When you don't know what the problem is, it's very hard to resolve. And so we're in this very confusing time, quite deliberately. And I really do hope that Pluto going through Aquarius has people realizing that there's something going on in the fabric of society that is not natural to human interaction, and that allows people to be able to step back and question what has been going on. And of course, we'll have that futuristic thinking, and then the tendency, because it's air, because it's very intellectual, the tendency to want to move into the future at all costs, and not really look at what is the actual natural cost or human cost of doing this thing. It's kind of, for me, a symbolism of that is wanting to establish a colony on Mars. It's like, is that project really necessary, or could we just put some of that energy here? And why? It's one of those things that I've personally never understood, and I understand from a technological point of view that it's extremely creative and pretty amazing to put a rocket in the air and get it to land at the same spot. I mean, it's pretty impressive, but we still then have people who live a kilometer away from the landing pad who don't have a home or have no food, or so that's not the Aquarian ideal at all. That's the Aquarian sort of shadow, and that's also the shadow of Pluto, that selfishness, this doing things without really considering. Yeah, and that was the next sentence that was following on. It's universal love, which is Aquarius, which is more accessible through Aquarius than personal love, than individual love. But that brings that lack of consideration for individuals. So again, it's that I love humanity, I hate humans kind of energy, where it's we're doing this for your own good. Beware. Beware when your government shows up to do something for your own good, or even worse, when some non-elected body does it. So Aquarius represents whenever and however people connect. So this is Aquarian online, and then showing up at a rock concert is Aquarian, going to church. All of those connections are very Aquarian, and I think Pluto will transform that even more. So I can't even imagine, given the transformation we've had in the last decade, of what will change in terms of how we connect with each other. And so Saturn brings into the Aquarian energy conformity, order, structure, compliance, and Pluto will undermine that. And if we even use Uranus in terms of the modern rulership, that Uranian energy is about rapid change. It's about sudden shocks and so on. So it's even more destabilizing. So I think I've said all that I want to. I've got so much written down here that it's almost gone. It doesn't make sense anymore. I do think that Pluto-Saturn combination will continue the censorship problem and enforced compliance. Propaganda, especially in Aquarius, propaganda will be even bigger. And I just wanted to read something which I found very, very beautiful. It comes from a friend of mine who was in Palestine and met a this is something that she read. It's a quote by Paulo Freire about Palestine and in general. So this is for me, very Aquarian. No one can be authentically human while he prevents others from being so. And maybe I'll just leave it with that and hear your thoughts on Pluto in Aquarius, because that's for me the essence of Aquarius, is to allow each other to be human and experience that in our collective humanity. So what else what are you looking at that we haven't spoken about yet?
I'm naturally optimistic, love to think of the higher frequencies that it can manifest. And what I'm thinking, when I think Aquarius, of the water bearer, the water of wisdom onto humanity. And so what is then, if wisdom, the very essence or truth, I think of absolute unity, that we are all connected. And so bringing this out, and like Travis was saying, going to Leo, just through the heart. So just bringing it very simple, staying grounded, and not, like you were saying, which I totally get, this splintering off into the spiritualism, but also staying grounded. We are in this society, and how can we realize our connectedness with spirit, with God, source, universe. And so then when I go back to Pluto, revealing the extremes we are capable of. So if we don't set boundaries, so if we don't have boundaries on this idea of being connected with spirit, then what does that limitless connection look like? Through telepathy, perhaps, telekinesis, teleportation. These are the things that I go to as far as the endless possibilities of connectedness of all things, with animals, nature. And I know that is totally not mainstream. It's hard for me to connect with the actual world events, what's going on. I definitely am in my little bubble in my home and doing my spiritual things. But I do know I'm living on Earth, and staying grounded to the realities that are going on whilst having the connectedness with all things. And we can't separate ourselves, you know, if we're hoarding food. I mean, you know, we need so many things, just like the food, the people that are working to get the food to the grocery store. I mean, we can be in our own rooms on Zoom and not have to communicate one-on-one or person to person. But of course, we cannot divide ourselves away from, unless, okay, you're living and growing your own food in your own little plot. But spiritually, no, we are still frequencies and vibrations. We are connected with the cosmos, with the galactic beings, and it comes back to that for me. And so in that aspect, I am hopeful and excited to see where our communications will reach, like galactically, and it comes with, of course, you know, the breaking down and the tumbling down of what the world as we know it. And it will look ugly, or it'll be hard, but I'm excited for what comes after. And even if that takes generations or, you know, centuries, that we're kind of going on that path of remembering the connectedness. And for me, that's Aquarius.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, we saw that in our individual stories as well. This the breakdown, it comes simultaneous with something that's also really important and really empowering. So this is going to happen collectively as well. And yeah, thanks for adding that in, because it's true that there's of course so many other things that are potentially very, very positive, in the same way as even what we're doing here, the good and the bad of Zoom, you know, the positive capacity to connect with people from around the world, and yet at the same time feeling quite isolated doing this. So the good and the bad are together, they're inseparable. So yeah, thanks for reminding us that. And anything else?
I would just say that with Aquarius, we could become emotionally detached, and it's important to try to not do that, and to not just stay up in our heads about things.
Yeah, so maybe that's also helpful with Saturn going through Pisces, that there will be much more, I think, of a Saturn in water has a tendency to be able to ground, paradoxically, like it grounds emotions and it puts people in a different space. It's not intellectual at all. So that actually could really help this in the initial phase with Pluto moving through Aquarius.
Yeah, natally I have my moon in Aquarius, but my Saturn's in Cancer, and so I kind of feel like that on a daily basis.
Yeah. So you get the balance.
Yeah.
Right. And Ronit, did you have anything else that you want to point out?
For me, it's I'm trying to figure out, you know, the Saturnian Aquarian to the Uranus Aquarian. Who is going to win? You know, who is going to be the one that shows the face and present itself to the world, and how will the world collectively behave? Will they behave in a very Saturnian way or Uranian way, you know? And the fact that Uranus will move into Aries, which will be very fiery and very abrupt, so there could be something to do with people vocalizing, communities vocalizing themselves and coming out and speak out about what actually disturbs them or what does not make them happy, as opposed to being quiet and just doing the work, which they did up until now when Pluto was in Capricorn. So maybe that's what I'm interested to see, who is going to be the leading character in the show.
Yeah, and it might even alternate as well, right? Like you could get these kind of flashes probably of real sudden change that is quite Uranian, and then also this real resistance to controlling populations or controlling minds or whatever, that is very Saturnian. So yeah, Aquarius is a very mixed bag that way. It's a really hard one to bring down.
It's quite, to me, it's quite like, it's a mystery of a place, you know, where you don't really know what's behind the scene.
Yeah. Wow.
That's where it's Pluto's job to expose everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's what will happen.
Pull the rug up. Yeah. Right. I wanted to just say one last thing about the religions that I forgot to point out when I was asking that question, is that a couple of Pluto in Aquariuses ago, 3 maybe, Constantine accepted Christianity, and that was a major shift in religion. And now here's that other thing that goes like hand in hand with the politics. It's that merging of the political unit with religion, meaning that there's an obligation now, hey ho, we're Christian, and it's coming from the top down, and this is what you should believe and or die. And so we see that in all these revolutionary eras. The French Revolution was the same. It's like, this is what we're thinking now, this is how we're going to behave now. And so this kind of religious dogma combined with lethal force is very much in that energy of this as well. So collective movements, strike action, collective bargaining, I think is one of the ways that people will have to counter that imposition from the top down. I think that's another thing that we might see, is that collective bargaining, that the unions that have been decimated over the last 30, 40 years, I think will also come back. If they'll maybe look different than they did before, but they may not be strictly speaking along specific lines of what people do for a living, but they'll be around ideas. So there'll be like a unification around ideas, very Aquarian, to take back power from in that way. Yeah, okay, I think we've covered a lot. I'm sure I really look forward to hearing the comments, reading the comments from people, because I'm sure there's so many things that we forgot and could mention or maybe didn't think about, and the comment section is always really interesting. So any last thoughts before we say goodbye? A prayer for Pluto in Aquarius. Please don't hurt me.
Don't give in to fear.
Don't give in to fear. Exactly. Yeah, very true. All right, it's been a joy talking to you again. And I really appreciate your deep revelations, your personal experience. I think it's really interesting. I find it much more illustrates what we're expecting or what we're going through. What you've gone through is a real entry point for other people to see what could be possible for them. And or if they might have gone through the same experience. I read that a lot in the comments, where people are really touched by the things that people have shared. And I really am glad that we have this opportunity to do that with a perspective that's our own, as well as the perspective of astrology, to help people see. So we look forward to our next session, and that one will be Saturn going into Pisces already.